Welcome to today's webinar. Before we start the presentation, maybe a few words to the agenda. So we will go through the presentation of the INDUCE project at the very beginning. INDUCE is a project which defines socially inclusive strategies for conserving fish functional diversity and promoting sustainable blue economy in Senegal. And after this presentation, we will have around 25 minutes for questions and answers. And yeah, so I would like to hand over to our partners from the INDUCE project. Our special thanks goes to Professor Dr. Agostino Merico from the Leibniz Center for Tropical Research, Marine Research, shortly ZMT, Dr. Adama Mbaye from the Oceanographic Research Center of Dakar, of the Senegalese Institute for Agricultural Research, for Dr. Kwabena Owusu from the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences, and Dr. J.C. Demura also from Leibniz Center for Tropical Marine Research, and to Sonia Bejarano also from Leibniz Center for Tropical Marine Research. They will now introduce INDUCE, which is implemented in Senegal, and will provide you with an insight into the project activities. Please, Agostino, it's your floor.
Yes, thank you, Sven. Let's see now if everything works as it should. So let me share the screen. Let me go full screen, and maybe I get the laser pointer. Okay, can you all see the screen? Can you confirm me, please? Yes, Sven says yes, so okay. All right, so thank you for the introduction, Sven. We are really pleased to be here and given the opportunity to present our project and the current status of our research. I just would like to add to the presentation that in fact there are 3 institutions involved in this project. 2 are based in Senegal, one already mentioned by Sven, all already mentioned by Sven, but just would like to underline that the Center for Oceanographic Research of Dakar-Thiaroye, then the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences in Bourg, so both in Senegal, and then the Leibniz Center of Tropical Marine Research in Bremen. We are located in Bremen, Germany. All right, so the study is based in Senegal, and it is concerned with fish and fisheries. So the coastal waters of Senegal are characterized by the Canary Current large marine ecosystems from the north and the Gulf of Guinea large marine ecosystems. These are extremely rich ecosystems, and therefore they make Senegalese waters very productive, very rich in terms of fishery products. And so fish and fishery are extremely important for the Senegalese blue economy. All right, the project is divided into 4 components. There is an ecological component with which we would like to investigate fish functional diversity, the functional diversity of commercially valuable fish, those fish who ends up in the fish markets in Senegal. There is a socioeconomic component with which we'd like to investigate whether governance frameworks, current governance frameworks take into account functional fish diversity, and if not, whether they could be adapted in the future based on our ecological results, based on the results we will obtain on the ecological part. An important component of our project is also related to educational activities. We plan to run a graduate school specifically focused in Senegal, specifically focused on functional diversity and governance. And another component is also related to a dialogue between science and relevant stakeholders of the fishery sectors. Okay, here below you could see all the people participating in the different components, and Sven already mentioned the speakers that will join this presentation. Okay, so this is the outline of the presentation. It's basically subdivided into 3 parts. In the first part, Kwabena will give an overview and the research plans, mainly those related to the ecological component. So we will talk about why we are interested in functional trait diversity, and how that is related to ecosystem services and blue economy, why fish, and it will conclude this introductory part by telling you a little bit more about the measures we designed for our project. So in the second part, which will be presented by different speakers, first Jay will give you an overview about the ecological data that we have collected as part of this project, and Sonia will present the preliminary results of the ecological part. And then Adama Mbaye from Senegal will tell you about the socioeconomic component of the project, the scientific context, the method is adopting, and the current status of that component. So I will tell you at the end, in the third part of the presentation, the situation with the other components, so the educational component and the knowledge exchange component, and I will tell you about the next steps as a way of concluding our presentation. Okay, so I think we can start with the scientific introduction. So Kwabena, please.
Okay, thank you, Ago, and good morning once again. We all agree we live in an era of widespread human-driven extinction, and so naturally there is a growing interest in cataloging the world's biodiversity and also conducting experiments to understand what the consequence will be if we lose some or if not all the species. But the greater question is, are we looking at the right metric of diversity? In other words, what is the correct metric, or what's the right metric for quantifying biodiversity? Now, biological diversity or biodiversity generally refers to all species living in a site, all the genotypic and the phenotypic variation within each species, and all the spatial and temporal variabilities in the communities and ecosystem that these species form. However, species richness, which refers to the number of species present in a habitat, has dominated our view of biodiversity. This is normally the common metric we think about when we're dealing with biodiversity. But there is a problem with using species richness as a metric for biodiversity, and that weakness is that it fails to account for the roles that the species play in the ecosystem. Now, functional diversity, which is a component of biodiversity, and that influences how an ecosystem operates and functions, has emerged as a more relevant representation of biodiversity. Next slide, I'll go, please. So functional traits generally refers to any measurable aspect of an organism that reflects what it is doing and how it interacts with other organisms and its environment. This can include aspects of its morphology, the body size, the ecology, the diet, the environmental, the tolerance, and the behavior. And we are interested in functional trait diversity because it influences ecosystem dynamics, the stability, the productivity, the nutrient balance, and other aspects of ecosystem functioning, and also provide ecosystem services which are vulnerable to humans. So therefore, any change in functional diversity have an implication for ecosystem management and governance, as well as economic growth. And changes in economic growth in turn also have an influence on functional diversity. So functional diversity remains very, very important. However, despite its relevance to ecosystem services, which are available to humans, this metric, functional diversity, is rarely considered in past studies. Next slide, please. So Senegal, as Ago mentioned, hosts a diversity of fish species, and preserving these highly productive coasts requires an assessment of how human-induced changes in the coast can affect the functional diversity of fish, and also understanding the links with ecosystem functions and services. And for our project, we mainly focus on morphological trait diversity, which is a sub-component of also functional diversity, because these traits are mostly closely related to the behavioral and physiological traits, and has a potential to offer a comprehensive understanding of the ecological functionalities and associated services that are impacted by fishing activities. Next slide, I'll go, please. Okay, so the overall goal of our project is to produce sound scientific knowledge for the conservation of fish functional diversity from a socially inclusive and environmentally sustainable economic growth perspective in Senegal. And to achieve this overall goal, we set out 4 measures. First, to assess the status of fish functional diversity and determine the links with ecosystem functions. And the second measure is to develop capacities and knowledge about functional diversity among students, to ensure that these students are acquainted with the novel data science method and the modern concept of functional diversity and blue growth, blue economic growth. The third measure, we seek gathering the perception of the local resource users, the local population, with the aim of assessing the effectiveness of the existing governance models in place in order to develop a more socially inclusive strategies for conserving functional diversity in the context of sustainable economic growth. And the last measure, we're creating a dialogue among the scientists, the stakeholders, the policies, in order to define the shared objectives and strategies for active promotion of functional diversity conservation in harmony with the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwabena. We move now into presenting you the actual ecological data that have been collected in conjunction with this project. So Jay, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the overview, Kwabena. So now I'm going to present the structure and the components of the data set that we have related to the ecological component of the INDUCE project. First of all, I want to give a background of interesting background of this data collection. That it was a lucky or a mystical decision insight that we had, because in the beginning of last year, we were working in Senegal in a different research project, and we have few days free, and we had the idea to go to the field and collect the data for a project that we didn't know if it would be approved or not, because it was before the final decision. And also it was before Corona pandemic, that if we didn't do this data collection that moment, that would be really complicated and challenging to do it afterwards. But anyway, it was really important to have this data now. So in that occasion, we visit 3 fishery markets. The Sali fishery market, that is a small fishery market that supply fish for local community and also for the tourism, because the touristic place. Umbur, that is a very large fishery industry that supply fish for the local community, for the regional community, for a broader demand, and also for exportation. They export for other countries, Europe and so on. And the third one, in the chronological sampling organization, SOCON, that is very close to this national park of Delta do Saloum. And this is a little bit larger than the Sali market, but considerably smaller than the Umbu, and also supply fish for the local demand. Next animation, please. Thank you. So here is myself and my colleague also working this project, David Tavares, work in the field, collecting, sampling the fish in the fishery markets. And next, please. And what we did there, we sampled as much as we could the diversity of the fish in each of these 3 markets. We collected many species, and within the species, individual levels, we took pictures for all of the individuals that we selected, that we collected. And how we took pictures of the individuals, And we use a scale, a measurement scale of 5 centimeters for later extraction, the measurement that you wanted to have from these pictures. And not only that, only for the individual levels, we also collect the value of the species in CFA, in the West Africa CFA currency. Next slide, please. So here I want to give a summary of the data that we have for the 3 fishery markets, Sokone, Mbo, and Sali, 3 fish markets. And overall, in these 3 markets, we collected 32 species and 646 photographs. I mean, over 600 individuals. And these fish silhouettes here surrounding the plot shows a little bit what I want to show to the audience is the morphological diversity of the fish that we have in our data set. That's important for our trait diversity component of this ecological data. And next, please. Next. Thank you. With this morphological measurement in the individual levels, we took all these over 600 individuals, and back in the office, we used the ImageJ project and used this reference of 5 centimeters as a scale to collect 25 morphological measurements per each individual, fish individuals. And in total, we had over 12,000 data points, that is, the individuals times the 25 morphological measurements. Next, please. Thank you. So we didn't stop there, because we end up with a big data set of morphological measurements. But based on this morphological measurement, we calculate the trait fractions. And these trait fractions were actually our morphological traits, because after doing some calculation based in the literature, we have this morphological trait that is very closely related to fish functions. That is the important aspect that you want to understand in this morphological diversity. For example, this morphological trait here, this BA, that's body elongation, that is the fraction of this morphological measurement, give us important information about the hydrodynamic and trophic aspect of the fish. So this measurement show us not only the diversity of species, but how the individual, this individual variability interact with the ecosystem. And this is a very important aspect to understand the link between the fish and the ecosystem. And this can provide us valuable information about how the fishery activities extract this variability, this diversity from the ocean, and the implication of this extraction for the conservation of the ecosystem, also for the development of socioeconomic activities related to fish. Next animation, please. Here is my last plot before I leave the space for my colleague Sonia. I investigated here the variability of each morphological traits across taxonomic components within species, across species, and also sites. Sites, I mean fishery markets. And this showed that the most variability for all the morphological traits is explained by the species difference across species. And here shows the relationship between the morphological traits and the fish functions that show that almost for all fish functions, the species variabilities are very important indication. So that's my part, and now I give the space for my colleague Sonia.
Thank you, Jay. Sonia, this is yours.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, so here I will just show you this image to, if you remember that Jay said that aside from collecting all these morphological measurements, for each individuals, they collected the price per kilogram. So as expected, there's a wide range of prices all the way from 150 francs to nearly 6,000. So there's species that have a very low value and species that have a high value and everything in between. So we can look at this plot like this, and it has limited potential. Like it's the information that it gives us regarding how value is attributed to different functions or different morphologies is limited. But if you go one slide further, Ago. So you can see that we could look at the traits the way the way Jay presented them. So we could look at the variability that species have across one trait, or we can show things in a more multidimensional way. So what you can see here is an ordination of the species, which are dots, black solid dots, based on their morphology, on their 19 functional traits. So species clustered together are more similar to each other, whereas species that are alone and isolated in the corners of the functional space, like this TLEP here, are very unique and very different from the rest in shape, and likely in the functions related to those aspects of shape. So for instance, that TLEP there in the corner doesn't have very many close neighbors that could replace it if it was overfished, for instance. And this would mean losing a species that is very unique in terms of shape compared to all the rest of species in the assemblage. So you can also see that or the other layer of information that this plot has is the arrows. And these arrows are the traits. So not only you can see how species are more or less similar to others in shape, but you can see what exactly is it that distinguishes them. So for instance, species to the right corner of the plot have the highest values of BAR and PFS, and some of the lowest values of BE, for instance. So you can start understanding how species distribute in this functional space. What is the range of functions that is being exploited in, or is being landed in fish markets? But you can also, if you go to one slide further, Ago, you can add all sorts of information to this plot, which is a way to understand how it relates to the dynamic of the markets, right? So here, for instance, we color code the species based on their mean price. So we have, again, in pink, the most expensive fishes, and in blue, the most, the ones with the lowest price. And so you can, if you give me one click, Ago, I can show you one of the most highly priced species. And we can see that this, so we can, without this approach, we only would be able to say that this little species here is being fished and it's highly priced. When we look at the location of the dot in this plot, we also know that that exploiting this species implies that we are exploiting one of the most hydrodynamic species with deeply forked caudal fins and very small eyes, all of which has functional implications. And so those are the traits that we are extracting from the ocean when we fish this species in particular, or those are the traits that are at risk when you fish this species, or when you give a high value to this species. And so if you give me another click, this is another example of a highly valued species, which likely implies that it's highly desirable too. And in this case, we have a more obvious case. It's a large-bodied species which has larger eyes, deepest and highly maneuverable bodies, and they are highly agile and fast swimmers. So we can get an idea of what are the traits that are priced higher. in the markets, in the fish markets. So on a opposite example in the next slide, we can see that the most economic, in the next click, we can see that some of the low prices, some of the cheapest species coincide with species that have high levels of elongation. They have a predominantly pectoral fin swimming style, and they feed with steep snouts on the water column, more than in the lower parts of the ocean. So we can see in this plot a full range of how price is distributed in this plot, and depending on what price indicates socially, this could inform us of the impacts of the fishery on the fish assemblages. So, for instance, if economic value indicates desirability, it means or it shows us where in the functional space are we placing the most desirable, and on the most pressure with the fisheries. And equally, it could be informative to look at this plot and to make management decisions of how species should be priced based on their ecological value, and how to divert pressure from some species to others based on their ecological importance. And so we expect that in future steps of the project, we can also overlay different layers of information in the same way as color coding the dots here, for instance, with known nutritional value that the species have. And that's the end of my part, Ago. So
yeah, thank you, Sonia. Thank you. Yes, with this we conclude the description of the ecological component of our project. We will now move to Adama, who will give us an overview about the socioeconomic component of our project. Please, Adama. Adama, can you?
You are on mute,
can
Adama.
You hear us?
You have to unmute.
My micro is okay. It's okay.
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to present a part concerning the governance of fish. The importance of fish in Senegal is not to demonstrate in terms of employ and export revenue and animal protein, and all this performance of the sector due by the artisanal fishery, which assures the 18% of production. However, this vital sector of the economy has been facing difficult over the last 10 years. Most of the species are exploited or support. There has been a sharp deficit in lending and the income of fishermen. And in the context, the mode of governance of the fishing sector is through being questioned. It is the context that the component of the INDUCE project seek to analyze the government of fish in Senegal through an institutional analysis of the co-management framework at artisanal fisheries. Okay, the next. Okay. And the overall objective to, as I said, in the context is a compact project is to analyze the overall objective to access of effective co-management framework, representing diversity, and evaluate the effectiveness of co-management framework, identify the strength and weakness of the practice of co-management in relation to fish diversity, and analyze each governance framework in relation to functional diversity. Okay, the functional diversity is a mean the function and the role that species plays in the ecosystem. There is a central question, is our main question. Okay. Next. And specifically, the methodology used by the team of component ecosystem is we focus on two sides, Petit Côte and Delta de Salou. And we use the survey unit are the following governance bodies: local fishermen, especially local fishermen council, local fishing committees, MP management committees, interprofessional economic interest grouping, and other village of network organization. And we target the actor, the main actor we target is profit data collection from organization leader as well as proceeds member. These are leaders of the organization and other member in the organization. Okay, it's the two group members, leader and other members. Next, please. And this is the team researcher, Adama, socio-anthropologist, and my colleague Ashim, ZMT, and two students who do their master in Cheikh Anta Diop University, exactly in the Department of Sociology. The COVID, the years of university as dispatched, and students just start on the June their stage in Serenity. Okay, this is the two students. Gugisan is a woman, and Mohammad Ahmed is a man. These are the two students who work in the team of SocioEconomic Component. Okay. Next, and we collaborate with a professor of Department of Sociology, as my Professor Abdul Salam Fall and Professor Lamin Jai, who supervises the master in for the two students. Okay. Okay. And the current study, we are also identified mission governance of work and actor, and we plan to driving the questionnaire and interview bit is already make it, and we have some revision with my colleague Ashim. And we start with the documentary research on governance and functional biodiversity, because the students are not familiar with this concept, and like to try to document the concept. We are developing the concept and structure of the paper, and the title is provisional title is the functional diversity of species and relevant of government measure in Senegal artisanal fisheries. And we next, please. Oh no. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Adama. Yeah.
My colleague Augustino complete.
Yes. Thank you, Adama. Thank you, everybody, for.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the connection is coming and going.
For my bad English.
Ah, no worries. No worries. No, thank you, Adama. Thank you, everybody, for the contributions to the presentation. Yeah, okay, just some final remarks. So just to tell you a little bit about the next steps, with respect to the ecological component, is we definitely need, these are very preliminary results, what we showed you, and we thought to anyway present them to you because they are very promising. We definitely need to work more on the statistical analysis, and as already Sonia mentioned, we would like to add additional information, including nutritional value and landing data in order to understand also, the amount of fish that is, or the amount of fish that is landing in the market in relation to the function of the fish itself. And we will have to start the concept for two ecological paper. So with respect to the socioeconomic component, Adama and colleagues will start the field survey. They will start with focus group discussions and questionnaire from mid of June, so in about a week or so. And they expect, I mean, we had some delay in this component because the university was closed for a number of months due to the pandemic, and so we could only recruit the master student only in the last month. So, but nonetheless, we are well on the way, and the plan is still to have the defense of the master thesis in March 2022. And we plan to finalize the article on the socioeconomic component that Adama just mentioned, hopefully by April 2022. Okay, the other two components, the graduate school. For the graduate school, we had planned to, it was originally scheduled for last February, but obviously because of the pandemic, that could not take place. So we are now postponing it to next year, to the beginning of 2022, and we are discussing with GIZ about the bureaucratic arrangements of that postponement. So this school will be postponed to the 2022. And for the knowledge exchange, we had planned a workshop towards the end of the project and the policy brief, and these are scheduled as we originally planned. All right, so this is pretty much what we had in mind to present you, and we are very happy to take questions or suggestions and start a discussion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this fantastic and very informative presentation. So I think we have got really good insight in your project activities. And yeah, you did a fantastic job. And so congratulations to that. And so keep on going. So for now, we have a questions and answer session. And yeah, please raise your hand if you have any questions or type it in the chat. And I will read it. So we have one from Moritz Sonnewald, please.
Hi, and thank you for your talk. That was really interesting, and I didn't know at all before of this artisanal fishery at Senegal. But I have a question concerning these fish markets. Are the fish markets in Senegal only supplied by their local artisanal fishery, or are there also foreign and big fishing companies which additionally supply these markets?
As far as I know, they are mainly locally. There are international fishery fleets who fish in Senegalese waters, as far as I know. But I think those fish do not land in Senegal, but they are already taken away. But probably Adama knows better than me. I should be the expert in that respect. Adama, is it correct? Is it mainly for local consumption? And of course, the artisanal fishery part also of the artisanal fishery is frozen and taken away and sold internationally. Yeah, not all the fish of the artisanal fishery stays in Senegal. Yeah. Adama, would you like to add or correct me, please? I cannot. Yeah, Adama?
You are
muted, Adama.
It's muted.
You are unmuted.
Okay.
Yes.
I say the most important landing is based in the artisanal fisheries. Landing is 18 or 19% of the landing,
Okay.
and the industrial fisheries are exported in other country. The main important is landing by the artisanal fisheries, is especially Senegalese.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe you can also stop the presentation, Agostino.
Yes,
So
I
then you
will
can
try
also
without kicking
leave,
myself out from the meeting. Wait a second, I need to go back to this pointer. Let me see. I'm still in the meeting. Yes, okay, good. Excellent.
Now we have bigger picture of all of us. So are there any more questions? Yes, Moritz.
Yeah, if no one else does, I have another one. I was asking myself if there are any restrictions in fish landings, or is artisanal fishery free to practically deliver everything they catch to the markets?
I think it's quite regulated, and they cannot fish everything. And I guess there are also limitations with respect to quantities, to total catches. But again, I would like to ask Adama he must know more than Adama is highly regulated as far as I know.
It is the most problem in Senegal. Is it? The access of the resource is free. Is free, okay. And all the measure of property is not respected. There are some license because it's not so contract. Fishermen can take or not take in a license, and
so there are regulations, but they are not fully respected. Let's put it that way. Right? Correct. There is governance, there are regulations, there are institutions, but
it is our topic to analyze the governance. What is the problem is the governance. Because most of the measures are not respected.
Okay, we have another question from Achim, and then I will go to Lydia. She has typed something in the chat. Achim, please.
Yeah, okay. Thank you to all my colleagues. Really a super nice presentation. When Adama and I were discussing the issue of linking governance and the functional diversity, we had still some puzzles, and I also realized when listening to the talk that I lack knowledge in fishery biology issues. Yeah, and from that perspective, I'm asking to Sonia. I'm just thinking if you're taking morphology as the measuring rod for functional diversity, in how far can you have different? I would just expect, okay, this is size, kind of fins and whatever, as you explained. And I was wondering in how far you could have different governance mechanisms to the same fishes which are looking the same. I mean, obviously, whatever mesh size, you would get all the same size. Yeah. If for example, different species are occurring in different time periods of the year, then you could differentiate that. But I was just wondering in how far you can actually, yeah, in how far different species with in how far you can make a difference between morphology and then governance mechanism. And the second question I have in relation to you was, when I interpreted your plot rightly, basically all the species which are very valuable are basically individual species, or they are filling one particular functional niche. And I was just wondering, are there also species where you would say they are very high in value, and a very similar species which fills the same functional niche is of extremely low value, so that we could say, okay, please catch all the high value species, but leave all the low value species, so that we optimize the system?
Okay, I'm gonna try and remember the first question.
Sorry, it wasn't that clear,
okay.
But that's my lack of fishery biology knowledge.
That's okay. So if I understand you correctly, so you would ask whether it is basically what I think your questions are heading is to how to use this functional space to make decisions, management decisions, right? Or conservation or design measures that could inform the fishery to catch some fish and not catch the other, and whether we can create measurements that protect more effectively fishes of the same shape, and other governance measurements for fishes of a different shape related maybe to the gear. So it's to my impression is that this plot or this kind of plot needs to be assessed from both ecological and social and economical aspects, so perspectives, because I can tell you that I can tell you where in this functional space do we place the highest value and where do we place the lowest value. And yes, are there species that are in the extremes? So we want, if value is directly related to desirability and to catch levels, then we want it away from we want it to be low in species that are very unique or very irreplaceable and very highly nutritious. So it's not something that an ecologist can decide on its own. I would need to understand what the value means socially. Do we price the value highly because, or do we have a high price for a species that is rarely found and then therefore not highly catched, or precisely the species that is highly valued is also the most frequently caught and is also the most nutritious? And how do we make a decision there? It's tricky. Should we lower the price? Should we and at the same time, the species that are cheapest. So what if a species is super cheap and super key and super unique and super nutritious? So should we make it more expensive so that it's not caught so much? Or it's a very tricky decision that, as I would argue that these plots need to be looked at from different expertises, so that the ecologist can say what the plot is showing in terms of ecology, and then you, for instance, with your knowledge of what value means and how value relates to consumption or to catch levels, then we can perhaps select the best strategy or the best recommendations. Yeah, I think.
Can I? Sorry.
No, I just want to say something. Thank you.
Okay. Can I add just briefly, because there is something that I find extremely intriguing in this discussion, which is, in the topic of the discussion, which is, the dilemma. What we are discussing, Akim's questions and Sonia concepts and arguments basically are, have a dilemma. What do we price? How do we price fish? Do we price fish according to what people like? Or do we price fish according to their function in the ecosystem? That's a dilemma, right? And at the moment, it seems to me that, a lot is about, what people like to eat, right? And this is a bit like connected to the problem of substitutability in present day, right? But the idea of our project is also to understand what is, many people go to the fish market and ask for a specific fish, for a name, okay? But we know very little about the function that fish has in the ecosystem. So we want to move towards the direction of where we say, okay, look, these fish have a functionality, have a function in the ecosystem, could be valuable, and possibly governance frameworks could take that into account. It's just starting a dialogue and then discussion in that direction.
Great, thank you. We have another question from Lydia from Tanzania. She says, thank you very much for the interesting presentations. Is there a relationship between functional diversity and socioeconomics of fishes? For example, age of fishes, material, lifestyle, etc.
Age of fish and?
The age of the
fishes. Age of the fishes. The material, the lifestyle.
Well, I don't know if you want to go, but perhaps I can start. That's our idea. Our idea of our project is that there should be a connection between functional diversity and the governance, the fish governance. There should be a connection, and these things should be related, because so far our understanding of fish diversity is mainly, over the last decades, was mainly driven by number of species, by quantities. But we know already since a while that also functions play an important role. There are very interesting studies over the last decade in prestigious journals that shows how, you know, these differences between a species diversity in terms of number of species, taxonomic diversity, and functional diversity. For example, there is a famous studies in Nature that shows that, for example, the highest number of individuals, the highest number of species you can find in the coral reef triangle, but that is quite poor with respect to functions, surprisingly. And so, you know, we are learning, as we learn more and more about the role that functional diversity plays into the overall concept of biodiversity. Our idea is that, you know, we need to start to think and analyze our governance frameworks, and therefore the socioeconomic component of the fishery sector, in order to understand how, you know, that concept of functional diversity can be considered in the socioeconomic aspect. So I think it's, you know, I would almost dare to say that this connection between functional fish diversity and governance and socioeconomics is at its infancy. But I don't want to sound too extreme. So I think our project aims at producing knowledge in that direction. Yeah, let's put it that way.
Okay, thank you. Also, Corinna added that fishes are more likely to exit declining catch fisheries if they come from families with a higher material lifestyle. And yeah, so are there any more questions? No, maybe I do have a question when it comes to the sustainability of the project, because quite often, yeah, it's quite difficult to have long-term sustainable projects, and a lack of perspective also. And what are you planning for INDUCE that INDUCE will have a long-lasting impact?
Oh, okay. But that has many aspects, right? I mean, did you mean the long-lasting impact, I mean, for the researcher involved in continuing the research in that field, or that our results are taken into policy consideration and so on? What
I mean, this, of course, this has at least the two aspects. So, but of course, in particular, for the transfer into decision making. So when it comes to the sustainability in Senegal for the fisheries, and yeah, you have mentioned some aspects, but maybe you could go a little bit more into detail. So what you are planning there when it comes to also to the political framework.
Yes, so I mean, maybe I can start, but anybody else can obviously add. It's a multidisciplinary project, so there are different perspectives. So, and it's, you know, the richness of the project is precisely these multiple perspectives. But in my view, our original idea was, I mean, it's a relatively short project, right? It's 2 years or slightly above 2 years. So there is only that much that you can do in that amount of time. Therefore, our idea was that, you know, towards the end of this project, we would like to have a workshop. We designed a workshop in which we would start a dialogue. We would between us and in order to present our results to people involved in the or to relevant stakeholders for the Senegalese fishery sectors. And we have also the ambition and the hope that we could involve some members of the National Assembly, which is, you know, the parliament in Senegal, and hopefully even ministries that are related to the fishery sector. Definitely, we will try to involve in this workshop the stakeholders that Adama and Hakim are involving in the socioeconomic component. I think it's about starting a dialogue, and with this workshop, and another plan was together with Rebecca also to think about a policy brief, a document, a report where we could summarize our results and possibly give some recommendations that could be taken into account by Senegalese authorities, but also by those fishery authorities that have similar characteristics, like artisanal fisheries of the same size.
Great, that sounds good. We are already at the end. If there is one last question, then we can answer it or discuss it. And if not, yes, Anke, please.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
It's really a short question, I think, or a short answer, but I was really curious what the sellers on the fish markets or how you approached them when you took the photographs, and what they said. Were they interested for what you would need the photographs, and would they be interested in project outcomes, or how did they react when you went to the market?
Yeah, that was thank you for asking this question. It was, as Jay mentioned, it was very spontaneous, and we had no idea whether we could do that. It was February last year. We actually came back from Senegal at the end of February last year, and 2 weeks after, and we were completely unaware that 2 weeks after that, the world will be in lockdown and we will be under a pandemic, situation. But anyway, we were there, and we were still preparing the second process of the proposal of the INDUCE project, and we had these free times from the project we had there, and very spontaneously we said, okay, why, while we were writing about how we wanted to collect data for the INDUCE project, we said, okay, we have free time, why we don't just go and see how it works, whether we can do that, who we can. So we started to contact local authorities, local fishery authorities, to have access to the market, whether we could go to the market, make photographs, and we explained that we would like to connect this data and so on. So also with the help of some people at CRODT, we could collect local authorities, and some people came with us, some representative of the local authorities came with us and accompanied us to these 3 markets. So in each place we went, in each town we went, we could have somebody accompanying us and getting us access to the market and doing the photos. So everything was very spontaneous, and we had no idea about how important, in retrospect now we realize how important that was, and so. And it went all surprisingly simple. We collected more than 600 photographs in these 3 markets. Everything was quite simple. People, the local fishermen were quite happy, and showed us the fish. So everything was quite simple in the end. But it was very spontaneous, very, very spontaneous. Sometimes if you plan, then you start to encounter lots of difficulties. But in this case, was very smooth and easy. But obviously with the help of the local authorities. Otherwise, I think it would have been a bit more difficult.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, Moritz, but that is the last question now.
It's not a question, but it just came to my mind. Maybe it would be good for the future of your project when you also would try to accompany some of the local fishermen on their boats, because I guess they also have a lot of bycatch that they even don't get to these markets because it's not of commercial value. And maybe do the same there, and then you get maybe not only 40 fish species, but 80 instead. That's just an idea that came to my mind.
Definitely, definitely. I think also, yeah, not only that, not only for the ecological aspects, but also for the socioeconomic. I think Hakim and Adama are already in mind to involve in the questionnaire also neighborhood, right, of people locally involved with the fishery activities. So yes, that's a definitely good suggestions, and we will keep that in mind for sure. Yeah.
Perfect. I think that is a very good end. Thank you also, Moritz, and thank you, Agostino, Adama, Kwabena, Sonia, for this great, and Gelson, for this great and presentation and insights into your activities. And I think we have learned a lot about the fishery trade diversity or functional trade diversity in Senegal. And yeah, we will accompany, of course, the INDUCE project within the MeerWissen initiative the next years. And yeah, if you have any questions, comments, etc., and would like to know more about this project, please go on our website. And we also will present tomorrow the recordings of this session here, and with a short news article. And we also will continue our MeerWissen webinars series next week with the Coastwise project. It will be the 17th, Thursday of June at 12 noon. So yeah, we would be happy if you would join us. And so that's it for today. Thank you very much and stay healthy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Sven. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks and bye.